with their still unofficial signing of Harrison Bader to a 2-year, $20.5 million contract, the Giants addressed a big need, but it also just continues the theme of this offseason, which is just very meh. Hello and welcome to Giants Baseball with Ben Kaspick. As the name, of course, suggests, we're going to talk about Giants baseball, and my name is Ben Kaspick. I have been podcasting about the San Francisco Giants since 2015, when I started an independent show with my friend Adam called Covecast way back then. And then we joined the Locked On Podcast Network. When I say we, it was just me. In 2019, and that show lasted with me hosting it for 6.5 years. And then we immediately launched this show, and we're getting more and more into the action as spring training approaches. We are not long at all from pitchers and catchers reporting for the Giants on February 11th. So that is really coming up just a few days after the Super Bowl, and the Super Bowl is set. So anyway, just a little bit of housekeeping, little note for you that this podcast is going to be paywalled. The first half is free, and the only place you can listen to the full episode is on Substack, and you can find it by searching on Substack Giants Baseball with Ben Kaspick, or you can find the page by going to benkaspick.com. That's Kaspick, and I'm going to try to give a little heads up when the first half is about to be cut off. And if you want that second half, it's just a $5 a month subscription or $50 a year, and you will get full access to all podcasts and written posts as well there on Substack. So with that out of the way, the Giants are reportedly in agreement with outfielder, center fielder Harrison Bader on a 2-year, $20.5 million contract. So we're going to break down who is Harrison Bader, why I think a lot of people are surprised at how cheap this contract is, and that has a lot to do with looking at his offensive numbers last year and reading a little bit too much into them. I think that it's pretty obvious and pretty easy to break down why he outperformed what we should expect from him offensively last year. There's a pretty simple explanation. If you just like the most basic quote unquote advanced analytics will paint a picture as to the unsustainability of what Harrison Bader did offensively last year. But this contract it doesn't reflect a belief that last year's offensive surge for Bader was any kind of sustainable. The contract more so reflects roughly league average bat, yet above average defense. And that is what I think the Giants want and are paying for here. And the analysis up on Fangraphs is that they quite like this signing for the Giants. And for me, I think it's perfectly fine. The issue is that I don't think an 81-81 team has done enough. And I still think that there's a hole, or, I think they would be well served to acquire a second baseman still, which still could happen. Like those trade conversations revolving around Brendan Donovan, Nico Horner, and then CJ Abrams. Right after we did our last podcast, there was a report that came out the same day by Andrew Baggerly that the Giants tried to acquire CJ Abrams from the Washington Nationals, and the Nationals did not, the Giants and Nationals not able to come to an agreement on what would be going back to DC from the Giants in exchange for possibly Abrams plus, given the names that were thrown out there. I was kind of shocked at some of the names that surfaced as names the Giants were willing to offer for Abrams. Like, it makes me think it may have been an even larger package, because those were some good, talented prospects, apparently, that the Giants were offering. So I still think that these second basemen are in play, But then I think the pitching is arguably more of a concern for me outside of Logan Webb, really. It's a bunch of question marks just throughout the whole thing pretty much. But on the offensive side, they I think are a little bit underrated. You look at their projected lineup up on, roster resource featured on Fangraphs with Harrison Bader in the fold, and what they've got, I don't know that this is actually going to, I would think maybe Jung Hoo Lee leads off as opposed to Elliot Ramos, who they have in the leadoff spot there. But you also have a bunch of everyday players when you look through this, as opposed to platooning. So that whole era of platooning is kind of becoming more and more a thing of the past with Buster Posey at the helm. But they've got Elliot Ramos in left. If he indeed starts in left, that would break the streak of however many left field. I mean, since Bonds, they finally broke the 30 home run streak. Not having a hitter hit 30 since Bonds. People missed this part. Since Bonds, not in 07, his last year there, but since Bonds in 04. So it had been more than 2 decades since they had a 30 home run hitter, but Willy Adames hit 30 on the last day of the season. But Ramos, if he starts in left, which he should if he's healthy, then that would break the streak. And then Rafael Devers is on this team, of course, projected to start at first. Willy Adames at short, Matt Chapman at third, Jung Hoo Lee projected to slide over to right field. And I think that is the plan. I have seen multiple interviews with Harrison Bader talking about agreeing to terms with the Giants. So this is far more than just a rumor. It's just he has not had or passed his physical yet. I don't anticipate that being any kind of an issue. It's just, it's worth saying if you're a Giants fan, you cannot take these physicals for granted. But this is a $20 million contract, not $350 million like the deal was for Carlos Correa, of course. But Jung Hoo Lee projected in right, Harrison Bader projected into center, and then DH projected to go to Bryce Eldridge to start the season. But that's once again, like you're kind of leaning on somebody who has very little experience to be your DH. I mean, that's kind of a little bit sketchy. Casey Schmidt projected to start at second. I think that this is where I say they'd be well served to go out and get a second baseman and let Casey Schmidt be like that super utility guy off the bench. People get hurt. People need days off. I'm not saying that you give up on Casey Schmidt at all. I think he would get plenty of opportunities and opportunities to break through and break out. We've seen flashes of it. And then Patrick Bailey projected to hit ninth and just be a defensive stud. One thing I keep thinking about, and we haven't talked about enough, is that we are going to see the implementation of the automatic balls and strikes system this season. It's going to be a challenge system. So at some point we'll break down what that means and what it means for Patrick Bailey. The projected bench, backup catcher of some sort, whether it's Daniel Susac, who was a Rule 5 pick that the Giants traded for, or moving on, the rest of the projected team, Gerard Encarnacion and Luis Matos, very affected by this acquisition of Harrison Bader, both out of options. I don't think you can have all 3 guys on the roster, so it's going to be very interesting to see what they do with either Encarnacion or Matos. I don't think you can have both of those guys on the roster, yet both cannot be neither can be optioned. And so that's something to watch as eventually this signing becomes official. Do you see a DFA of one of those players, or a trade of one of those players, or a DFA followed by a trade? And then Christian Koss projected to start the season on the bench, although he's someone who can be optioned. So that's what I'm saying. So can Casey Schmidt, by the way, but if you get a second baseman, you have options with Schmidt and Koss. And then Drew Gilbert projected to be on this roster, although he can be optioned, and you could have Luis Matos. You could carry Encarnacion and Matos, but I think you'd rather have a lefty. Otherwise, that would be an all right-handed bench. But you do have that option. So anyway, I think it's time to get into Harrison Bader, the player, as we have yet to break that down. But if you're unfamiliar with his game, this is a guy who's been one of the best defensive center fielders in baseball since he debuted at age 23 or his age 23 season. I'm not sure exactly when he debuted, but he's now entering his age 31 season, actually 32. He'll be 32 in June. And he's played in about 1,000 games with many teams. That's part of like, it's kind of an indicator sometimes when you've played with a lot of teams, like why didn't anybody want to keep him around long term? Cardinals did. He played with the Cardinals, who he started with from 2017 through part of 2022, and then he was dealt to the Yankees, and then started 2023 with the Yankees, and then he was dealt to the Reds, and then signed with the Mets, and then was on the Mets, and then then last year he signed with the Twins and then was traded to the Phillies. But if you look at last season, you're just looking at a huge batting average on balls in play spike, and that really explains the uptick in offense. In his career, he has a 305 batting average on balls in play, and all of a sudden last year it jumped up to 359, and that's just, nobody really sustains a 359 batting average on balls in play. He did up his power output to a 172 isolated power, hit 17 home runs. That was a career high. But if you look at the batting average, 277, that's well above average in today's game. The on-base percentage of 347 last year, those are not numbers that I would expect to be replicated. Also, the slugging, which is influenced by batting average. Like if the batting average falls 40 points, that slugging is also going to fall like 40 plus points. And so his career numbers is, a 247 average, a 313 on base, and a 401 slugging. And I think that's more in line with what you should expect versus a 30 point higher than that batting average, a 30 point higher than that slugging, and a 48 point higher than that, on base percentage, and then a 48 point higher than that slugging. So a little bit below average offense, roughly average offense, I think is what you should expect, as opposed to about 22% above average, which is what we saw last year. So getting to the defense, it's worth noting that, and it's been well documented, that the Giants' outfield defense was among the worst in baseball. They tied with the Orioles for the worst in baseball with negative 18 outs above average, which is a Statcast metric, by their outfielders last season. And if you look at the individual players, I like to look at, okay, well, who's making that up? We are going to look at that in just a second here. There was underperformance big time by Jung Hoo Lee at -5 outs above average. Like every single outfielder really who had any kind of, let's just set the minimum to 100 attempts out there, and they only had 4 guys make at least 100 kind of plays on a ball, and everybody was below average. If you set the minimum to 50, Drew Gilbert pops in at +2 outs above average in some number of attempts. It doesn't show me, but Mike Yastrzemski, -3 outs above average. He has since moved on, signed with the Atlanta Braves, got a nice little $20+ million contract. Jung Hoo Lee, though, at -5 outs above average. Luis Matos, -6, and Elliot Ramos, -9. This is really random, but I don't like, as a former outfielder myself, I feel like him having his little card that tells him like where to position himself, he slides it into the palm of his glove, like underneath the glove in his palm, and I feel like that would be very distracting, like to have a slippery, because you're sweating, like piece of laminated like paper in your palm while you're trying to play outfield defense at the major league level. So maybe time for him to put that in the back pocket. Like I literally haven't seen any other players in the major leagues put that in their glove like that. And when you're also not performing well defensively, any little thing that you can possibly try. So both Jung Hoo Lee and Ramos have reportedly been working hard on their outfield defense, but working hard is different than actually seeing it translate. But Jung Hoo Lee, one of the best attributes of his game is that his arm has been above average, but he did not make great jumps. He did not do well coming in on the ball. That was true of Ramos too. Going in on the ball was a problem for him and for Jung Hoo Lee, and also Ramos going to his right towards the foul line was a problem. So was going to his left, really. So, but for Lee, it was more of coming in on the ball, but also there was like some timid play by Jung Hoo Lee, I would say, as well. So Harrison Bader, he takes charge out there. Like, I've watched him play enough where he's one of these guys where he's a true center fielder, where I think with Jung Hoo Lee, for whatever reason, like, and also just over the years, I think of Austin Slater, like, they just haven't had a center fielder. It's the simplest thing. Like, I played center field not at a super high level, like in terms of college or anything like that, but you're just taught, like, you got to take charge out there. And we just haven't seen enough of that. Like, waving guys off, like screaming for the ball. You have to do that as the center fielder. If it's you and a corner outfielder kind of coming together, you need to take charge and they need to trust that you're going to get that ball if it's kind of in between. And Harrison Bader does that. Like, I've watched him enough to see, I can visualize how he calls for a baseball and the way he kind of circles around a ball, gets behind it when he needs to make a throw. He's just been a very good center fielder in his career. So if we look, I mean, Statcast started in 2015, I believe. So if we go back to 2016, which is when outs above average goes back to, and look at all fielders with a minimum who qualify, basically outfielders, let's just see who pops up in terms of outs above average. It's going by, hold on. It's splitting the years, which we don't want to do. We want to see cumulative outs above average. So Kevin Kiermaier, notable defensive wizard, comes in at number 1 with 91 outs above average since 2016. And Harrison Bader comes in second among all outfielders with plus 77 outs above average. Byron Buxton third. So let's go back to, 2021, just to make it a little more recent.